Yeah.
So good evening, everyone, and good afternoon as well for those who are joining us from everywhere in Canada, I guess. So thanks for coming to our Smallholder Swine course for veterinarians with our instructor, Dr. Sue Berlachenko. This webinar is hosted by the Canadian Animal Health Surveillance System, otherwise known as CAS. Before I begin our presentation, I just wanted to say our thoughts are with those who are in. I'm just getting. So just make sure you're muting yourself when you come in. Thanks, that's great. So I just wanted to say our thoughts are with those who are in the Maritimes currently dealing with Hurricane Fiona. I had a few people that emailed saying that they couldn't make it, and that's okay. I just wanted to say our thoughts and are with those who are there right now. I know there's a lot of stress and a lot of things going on. So I just wanted to provide some information on the Canadian Animal Health Surveillance System. My name is Dr. Doris Leung, and I'm the Division Director with CAS. So first of all, CAS is a division of Animal Health Canada, and our work is to support effective, responsive, and integrated animal health surveillance in Canada. And so CAS works with numerous organizations, as you can see here, and these organizations support animal health surveillance, and this includes, for example, the CWHC, CFIA, CPARS, CZ, our diagnostic animal health laboratories in Canada, CCVO, as well as our various universities in Canada. We also work closely with our regional surveillance partners, and that includes the Western Canadian Animal Health Network in Western Canada. We have OWIN in Ontario, RAISO in Quebec, and ADCAN for Atlantic Canada. All right, so really our key work areas include building people networks with CAS, information sharing, building national capacity, as well as working collaboratively with our animal health surveillance partners to develop surveillance projects. So I just wanted to mention a large part of our success with CAS is building people networks. And so we currently have 7 CAS species-specific networks, and that includes our aquatic network, beef, companion animal, dairy, equine, small ruminants, as well as 2 special topic networks, and that includes antimicrobial resistance and use, as well as vector-borne disease network. We also have a smallholder working group, and we come together every quarter to share information on animal health and animal welfare, as well as animal disease surveillance topics. So just wanted to mention how we support veterinarians in Canada. And so, as you know, we have this smallholder swine course for veterinarians. As of March, we had an update on HighPath AI, and that was geared towards veterinarians who work for small flock poultry. We also had, around a year ago, we had a laboratory in cross-Canada check-in on African swine fever. And these were all well-received webinars. And I think it's a little bit cut off right now, but in terms of information sharing, so a lot of our information sharing is through our CAS website. So that's at cas.ca, CAHSS.ca. It's available in English and French. And so here you'll see a lot of information on our different CAS species networks that I just mentioned, our 2 special topics networks. And if you hover over to CAS networks and go into our smallholder page, you'll see quite a bit of information on small flock poultry, as well as smallholder swine information, as well as information on how and where to submit tissue samples to the different veterinary diagnostic labs in Canada. And so just to wrap up, in terms of where you can follow us, I just mentioned our CAS website. We also have a Podbean page. So we have something called Animal Health Insights. That's our podcast series. We also have our Twitter, where we usually try to promote and post any real-time disease alerts, as well as sharing information from our surveillance partners, as well as from basically information that we've created through CAS as well. We also have a LinkedIn, so feel free to follow either any of those pages just to get real-time information on animal health surveillance topics. And lastly, just wanted to acknowledge that our CAS activities are provided through the Agri-Assurance Program under our CAP partnership. So that's a Canadian Agriculture Partnership. So that's it from me, Sue, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, and I'll continue to admit people in.
Will do. All right, and I need to shrink this. Whoops. And get to our first slide here. Also want to echo Doris's words on the terrible events in the eastern part of Canada, and I certainly hope that the recovery, although it's going to be long, is not as painful as the episode was. A terrible thing to happen. So going forward, yes, this is our second year of giving this course, and it's quite compressed in a sense of it's hard to put together many years of experience in this course, and not just my experience. You know, I've embraced others' experiences as well to put together for this course. And this course also is built on the Smallholder Manual for producers. It's a similar setup for this veterinarian course. So I would encourage you to visit the CAS website and look at these manuals. They're really, really good. There's one that's from BC. It's quite large. It's over 200 pages. There's the CAS manual, which is much shorter and you know, a little bit more nimble to read through. And Ontario Pork also has a different version on their website. So you have a lot of resources for producers who are interested, but also as background information for veterinarians. And as I tell my students when they're listening to me drone on in class, that the reason I don't give them notes is because, or I give them notes is because I want them to pay attention to the PowerPoints themselves. And so hopefully that's what you're going to do, because I don't know if you'll be able to keep up with your writing with how fast I can speak. So Doris has already given an introduction to CAS, so I'm going to go past this slide. And this slide was just to remind me that that's where you can locate these smallholder manuals for producers that are interested. The CASV, British Columbia, and CAS, Ontario Pork all have those manuals. Just a little bit of background about me. I'm an OBC graduate of many moons now. Got my diplomate, obtained my diplomate in swine health and production 2005, and I recertified in 2015, which means it's looming on the horizon again for another round. Because I'm a never-ending student. I also got a Master of Public Health in 2013. And I run my own swine practice, essentially swine, and I deviate every once in a while just for excitement. So, you know, the question becomes, you know, sort of existential. Why are you here? What is your connection with pigs? And hopefully you're here because you've had some connection with pigs and you're interested to learn more, or people are contacting you looking for information. And, you know, hopefully you're going to gain some information from this course and some resources, not just what I'm telling you, but, you know, being able to go and find further information about smallholder pet production. So I think the other thing that, you know, when we're looking at the vet client patient relationship, you know, when we're approaching this, we certainly have to consider, you know, is it a pet animal or is it a food animal? And your approach to the case is going to be driven by practice regulations. So obviously in Ontario, you know, where I am, you know, there's different regulations required for pet maintenance and records as opposed to livestock. So, you know, think about these things as you're approaching a client who's either got, you know, pet pigs or food animal pigs, you know, and who are your clients as they're asking you to approach them. Are they backyard producers who are just raising pigs for meat production? Are they just having animals for fun? Do they have pet pigs that you're going to be working with, or animal shelters? I had been working with a potbelly pig shelter for years. It's just disbanded through illness in the owner, and the pigs moved on to other areas. But that was actually quite a large one. We had 150 pigs in that particular operation. So, you know, smallholder encompasses any number of approaches, and these photos sort of demonstrate what you can run into. And I try to carry a camera and iPhone with me at all times, because all these pictures I took, and I just have thousands more, and it's just so much fun. It can be really satisfying once your comfort level with pigs goes up. So let's go on to the meat and potatoes, if you will, of the normal pig. And it's important to understand the normal pig. We go into the sick pig next week, but knowing the normal pig and developing an approach to the normal pig really allows you to evaluate, and especially as you go through time with the client, how things are going. After the third lecture in this course, we certainly will be getting into, biosecurity and dealing with, necropsies and things. And part of that, we're going to also put up a video on foreign animal diseases through the Ontario Vet Medical Association that you can review at your leisure. I put that together for them. So you need to know what normal is before you start evaluating what's not normal. And that's really important. So that's why we're going through this today, and hopefully in record time. So pig terminology, I think most of you are familiar with it, but just in case you're not, a gilt is a young female that hasn't given birth. A barrow is a castrated male that and he's castrated before sexual maturity. A grower pig is just that, he's growing up before he's going to go for slaughter. And a barbecue pig is a pig that's usually sold, especially in the summertime, as a lightweight pig as a whole pig barbecue. We now also, just for your interest, slaughter seems to be a term that is going a little bit sideways, and I don't think it's bad. I often hear harvest now, and I think if we're dealing with the general public and explaining some things to them, harvest seems to have a more friendly connotation, I guess, than slaughter, but that's an aside. So we have traditional herd types. We have farrow to finish, and these are, we're talking smallholder. It's often you'll see them have a few sows, and they'll be raising the piglets up from breeding to birth to the sale of their market hogs. You also have people who will have grower finisher pigs only, so they'll purchase pigs and grow them up to market weight and sell them or use them for home use. And then I don't think we're going to see this much in smallholders, but I'm putting this here anyway. I work with commercial clients who produce either wean pigs for sale to the States or 25 kilo pigs. And so they breed the sows, raise the piglets, and then they're either sold at 3 to 4 weeks of age or as 25 kilo pigs. So those are traditional herd types that we have. We also have in swine production, I have this thing at the top that's driving me crazy. I'm going to try and move this out of the way, sorry. Traditional swine production. So we have, pigs is math. I love to tell people that. And I'm going to, whoops, this is not going to go away. Okay. Pigs is math. So you need to know what the math is. And pigs are wonderful math, because if people ask you what's the gestation, it's 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days, which is wonderful. I think the pig's favorite number then must be 3. We breed female pigs about 220 days of age, or about 135 kilos, 7 months of age on average. Pigs are, that's an American number there, 2 to 3 pounds or 1.5 kilos at birth. And then, so we move them to an area where they can have their babies when they're ready to farrow. And frequently 12 to 13 piglets per litter, but it can be higher than that. I think my record production number for pigs born was 25 on a commercial sow. Yes, she must have been as huge as I don't know what. So they clearly had to foster a number of those pigs. So sows will nurse the piglets, and usually we wean in commercial herds 3 weeks, but it'll be longer in the smallholders. There's no rush to move them out for the most part. So they'll leave them on 4, 5, 6 weeks of age. Then they move to the nursery area with other piglets from litters, where they have specific temperature requirements, bedding, etc. And then from there to the grow finish barn. So that's just sort of the circle of life, if you will, of traditional swine production. So while we're talking about traditional swine production, we should talk about traditional breeds in swine production, because this certainly came to my attention not too long ago, and I'll tell you why in a minute, so I'll keep you holding your breath. But Duroc is a common sire line we use in commercial swine. And so for those clients who are purchasing piglets from or 25 kilo animals from a local commercial producer, they're usually crossed with Durocs. They grow fairly fast. They're pretty docile. They're very nicely marbled meat. So they're nice pigs. Yorkshire is often used in commercial pork production. We'll cross that over with a landrace, which I'll show you in a bit. They're pretty good moms. White color, the Petrin, to put some high yielding, very lean genes into certain lines. And they can be prone to stress. We don't see many of those around now. They're usually sort of blended in the background of these pigs. Landrace, again, crossed with the Yorkshire, really good moms, floppy ears. And there's your commercial gilt that something like this. But let's look at the heritage breeds. So, the Kuni, cute little pigs, short snout, they're a grazing pig, often raised as companions for people. They have a high fat content, flavorful meat. This is telling me my internet's unstable. Hopefully we're good here. Yes, and they're tricolored. And I just was in conversation with someone that told me they can be up to 3 years to produce a market pig. So one must have patience when working with Kunis. Berkshires, another heritage breed, they grow faster. They're kind of black and white pig, pretty cool. Certainly they were a big rage a few years back. A lot of the higher end restaurants were looking for Berkshire meat because it was supposed to be more flavorful to eat. And so there's quite a number of people that went into raising these specialty pigs for the restaurant trade. The Mangalitsa, as odd as it looks, it's around, and they're actually a Hungarian origin pig with really thick curly hair, clearly are hardy winter pigs, and they have about a 50% fat content. So obviously used for lard production, which is, big on the menu in a lot of countries in Europe. They're pretty cool pigs. Large black, another big British pig, very docile, hardy, very big pigs. Clearly they're black because they're called a large black. And our friend the Tamworth with erect ears. So it looks like a Duroc, except its ears are upwards, and they're slower growing pigs. And so when we have here considered a bacon pig, it means that they went to market, at say 70 kilos instead of our 120 kilos. Their meat was best at that stage, and obviously take a little less, fewer days to go to market. Our friend, the wild boar, we're probably discouraging people from having those now because of the issue with feral pigs. And so I'm not going to digress into a discussion about feral pigs, but make sure those that have them still have to make sure that the fencing is solid and have to be maintained. There's some really good description of fencing. I think I might have it later on in this talk, but they're difficult pigs to handle. They can be quite aggressive. What's happened is that escapees or freed pigs have bred with feral domestic swine who have gotten out of smallholder operations, and now we have this quote unquote super pig. And so instead of having 3, 4, 5 piglets, they're having 8 or 9, and they don't really have a lot of predators. So on the right, actually, we have sort of a pigloo under the trees there. A photo from the winter time, and they'll nest underneath there, and they'll all huddle together to stay warm. And in the bottom right, you can see the destruction, the swath of destruction that they can cause. Certainly in the States, it's a huge problem in the southern states, and they've been known to attack people as well. So probably we would discourage the ownership of these here. We're trying to make sure that they're not around too much. So where are we going to get these pigs? Where are these people going to get these pigs? And, really auction markets and sales barns are not ideal because it's usually the lesser quality pigs, or if there's been a disease episode in the barn, they'll often take a number of animals out that aren't performing well, and they'll put them into sales barns, hoping somebody else will buy their problems. Now, there are good pigs in fairness too, so I shouldn't say this as a blanket statement, but preferably the smallholder should try and find a producer who's willing to sell him pigs, wean pigs or breeding stock. Single source is best. Often the producers will be happy to vaccinate the pigs prior to purchase. And there could be a relationship between the commercial swine producer who sells these pigs and the person who's purchasing them. I find that, a number of commercial operators are unhappy at times with smallholders in the neighborhood, but once they understand that, they've got a few pigs, or this veterinarian working with them, or trying to maintain the health status, or they can assure the health status by selling pigs, you get this great relationship starting up, and, a community of pigs sort of happening. So I've seen, attitudes go from negative to positive, and I think we need to encourage that. So our job as veterinarians, my job, one of them is certainly to contact, if somebody's trying to purchase pigs from somebody, I can contact them and say, I need to know your health status, and make sure it's acceptable. Now that's if I'm working for commercial person to commercial person, but even with smallholder pig people, you can call a commercial operator or call his veterinarian and try and find out, what is the health status? Is there anything you need to be concerned about? Are these pigs vaccinated or dewormed? And especially if the smallholder's purchasing pigs from a commercial person, and we always want to be mindful of withdrawal times in case they decide to sell some of the pigs into the barbecue pig market in the summertime. The big thing here is what came to our attention in a big hurry when COVID and the lockdowns came to us, is that there were nowhere for pigs to go, and that was also on the commercial side as well as smallholder. So smallholders, if they're purchasing pigs, even now, they should make sure they have an outlet for pigs to go to harvest. A lot of these small butchers are booked months in advance. I was just talking to somebody about beef cattle, and they were booking their cattle were ready, but they could not get them in till January, I believe it is. So, there could be a bottleneck, and pigs just don't stop growing. So you might, have a smallholder who's got pigs. We had a situation here in Ontario where a fellow had 200 of them and nowhere to go. And mercifully, the commodity groups can step in and maybe find a place for them to go. On the aside with this, it also pointed out to us that these small butcher shops and small abattoirs are a really important part of our ecosystem for harvesting meat. And, as the big plants sort of fell apart with, losing people to shift to COVID, and these smaller plants picked up a lot of pieces for us. So we all work together. It's one big circle. So at any rate, and the last point here too is make sure they're booking ahead, because large pigs really are harder to work with than the butcher shop. You've got a 500-pound pig. I mean, you've got, a 40-pound pork chop. That's really hard to work with. So try and encourage them to plan ahead. And alongside of trying to plan ahead is also alerting people to the pig trace program, which all of our commercial producers are part of. And it's a program that tracks the movement of animals within the supply chain. So if we had to trace back for any reason, we're able to do so relatively easily. It's a proactive measure. It's mandatory by law through the Health of Animals Act. So they have to be able to trace their animals somehow. And so we have different methods, and I think the smallholders, certainly can acquire a pig trace tag, usually through your commodity group is where they can get them. If the pigs are going to fairs, they need to have a tag in their ear. Unweaned pigs can go with a herd marked ear tattoo, and that will come with a premise identification through the commodity group. There's forms that you can fill out, and they will then give you a herd mark. So you're actually able to use either a tattoo or an ear tag once you have a premise ID. I did check this out. So if these smallholders don't have a premise ID, they can still acquire the pig trace tag, because once they take these pigs to market, they'll have to note where these pigs, the origin of the pigs on their farm. And so if something were to be required to trace back, then the tag will have an address associated with it and can go back. Pig trace is easier because it's recorded online, and we can do it that way as well. So there's a little bit of requirements there, and then I think it's important to inform small producers of this, because the small plants also have to have, pigs must be tagged going into them as they must be going to the larger commercial plants. And this is also on my radar. This came on my radar a long time ago. So I'm just checking my questions here for a sec. A long time ago, you should, as a veterinarian, understand the codes of practice, national codes of practice for livestock, and especially if you're going to be in swine, you should read them. They're not difficult to go through, and in the codes of practice, there's requirements which these must be met. These standards must be met by all producers. There's even a section for pigs housed outdoors. And the reason why it's important to know the requirements is because the different provincial animal welfare acts will reference these requirements for farm animal welfare evaluation. In other words, these are sort of the accepted standards of practice for farms. So it's really important to go through them. And the requirements in the National Farm Animal Codes of Practice are outlined in yellow, so they're easy to find. Okay. So, as I said, requirements must be adhered to, and recommended practices, they encourage continuous improvement in animal care. So recommended practices are best practices, but they're not requirements. So example of requirements, would be housing must be designed, constructed, and regularly maintained. Sows must not be kept in farrowing rates longer than 6 weeks. Sows must be able to stand up, lie down, and eat without interference with each other, and every facility must have a hospital pen. So just basic concepts, but it's important that you understand them and the smallholder understands them. Pigs must be able to access feed and water, must be humanely moved, and castration must be accompanied by analgesia, and we'll talk about that next week also in pig procedures. And a requirement is that a valid vet-client-patient relationship must exist. So this is important, and it's also important in the light of we're a little short on vets right now. So sometimes there's a little bit of problem, especially I do, and other vets as well have worked with the animal welfare inspectors, and they, one of the first things they'll say is, well, do you have a vet? And they'll say, no, we can't find one. So for those of you here today, I'm delighted, because you'll be able to help us out and get these VCPRs going. Another awareness that we should really have is, what can and can't be loaded on trucks when they're going to either a cull market or to slaughter. And, pigs, things go wrong with pigs as they do with other livestock. So I think you need to understand what, can go or can't go. And so this decision tree is found in the codes of practice. And I think I've also put it in the notes as well. So I'm not going to go through all the information in here, but you might want to be aware of them, or at least be aware to find them, so that we don't have something being loaded on a truck that could cause severe welfare issues for the pig itself. So with that vet-client-patient relationship that I referred to, your pet pig approach, and I referenced this early in the beginning, you need to get background information. And so for pet pigs, it's diet and it's housing and exercise and vaccination history, where were they sourced, if they're able to find out where they came from, and how are they raised. And so that's a whole sort of different spectrum of approach than if we're rearing pigs for food production, because we're always interested in knowing the source of pigs. Obviously, we're going to be evaluating the environment and the housing, the management, the feed, water, and the vaccination. And so smallholders, they often have, groups that are on Facebook or other social sites where they can discuss with each other, but you obviously as a veterinarian should also be a great source of information. And, referencing that we can't find a vet and suddenly you are their vet, you gain a client, you can work with them, find out about their health plans and what their health challenges are. And, even if this is your early days as a swine vet, there's lots of, not lots, I should be careful. There are swine veterinarians out there and more than happy to help people out if you're having questions or, you want to work through a problem with somebody. And the one thing that I put in here as well is contact your provincial pork organization. They have so many resources. And I wish I really became more involved with mine years ago as a young vet. And I've been working more closely with them over the last number of years, and they're amazing. I think we try and do it all as vets. And I think there's times where you can reach out and say, I need some help here, and they can maybe supply some assistance if we're working through a situation, or even just trying to get a client registered, for pig trace purposes, whatever. They're terrific. So don't forget them as a resource. And, as you're building that swine practice, even with smallholders, you'll become familiar with the different slaughterhouses, the transporters, even hoof trimmers. Probably not so much for the smallholder for food production, but certainly for pet pigs. And, you become certainly a fountain of knowledge and can encourage people to make use of these resources. So swine vet medicine, and I just stuck this in here because it came to me as I was getting ready for this talk, and Shrek popped into my mind, probably because it's been on the tube not that long ago. And now, that movie's getting old, but I'm not talking about how old I am either. But saying that, do you remember when Shrek was talking about, ogres have layers, and so they were referencing onions, and I use the onion metaphor for my approaches to herds. And it doesn't matter if it's smallholder or if it's large commercial herds, because there's layers of management, there's layers of feed, there's layers of environment, there's layers of pig types that go to make the entire ecosystem that you're looking at. And every herd is a little bit different than every other herd. Overall, at 20,000 feet, they all kind of look the same and seem to function the same. But as you get down closer, peeling these layers really help you to understand how that particular herd functions and what the level of knowledge is and expertise. And so over the years, I have decided that diseases really aren't as big of a problem as they used to be when I was a young vet. A lot of trouble is just simply the buildup of environment or management errors that caused a disease to manifest itself. And I'll give you an example. Now, this is with a commercial herd, but they struggled last year, and these are fabulous people. They are on the mark. They're cutting edge producers. I really enjoy working with them. And they've had a situation last summer in their grower pigs where there was a lot of diarrhea, and we'll talk about pig diseases next week, but they had diarrhea in some of the pigs, and kind of a jello bloody kind of stuff coming out, and I sent poop samples away for analysis, and we wound up with Lawsonia, which invades the terminal ileum and causes thickening and malabsorption and diarrhea, and it can cause sudden death in larger pigs. And so we dealt with it, and had to medicate the feed to treat it so that things could get back on board. At the time I mentioned, vaccination, because there was a vaccine for it, and they called me back. It's almost a year later, and it's resurrected again. And this time, I had more brain cells functioning, I think, when I went out, and I said, geez, we've done, periodic medication, and we really should start vaccinating. And I said, wait a minute, are you washing these pens? Are you able to wash your pens regularly? And it's quite a large operation. And as I said, pigs is math, and pigs is also how many pounds per square foot are we, producing. That's one of the evaluation parameters we can use for swine. I don't do that one, but so they're really good producers. They produce a pile of pigs, and their barn is like at capacity. How are they going to wash these floors? How are they going to wash these rooms? Where are they going to put the pigs when they're washing? So what's happening is we've got an environmental load, and then just recontaminating the pigs. So the problem is not, oh my gosh, why am I breaking again? The question is, how can I divert some pigs? Where can they go? Or can I sell off some to make a little gap in production so I can wash the floor? So I think that's kind of a cool example of, oh, there's a little squeaky voice. I like that. I can either look at it as, it's a disease problem, but I think going back and peeling that onion gave me a much better approach to solving this. So with smallholders, it depends on the size. I mean, if they've got 3 or 4 pigs, you probably don't have much of a vaccination or deworming history or a health or disease history. But, some smallholders can be up to 50 sows. So, 20 sows, 30 sows. And I hesitate to say maybe 100, but maybe. And so what are their goals? Are they bringing in pigs? Are they closed herd in that they have their own animals and they're just, they're not bringing any more breeding stock? Do they have any kind of biosecurity? Where are they sourcing their feed? Their water source, that's important. And I'm not going to get into the details, but, is it surface water? Is it well water? That can also influence a lot of issues on farm. What the farm setup is, and also certainly, euthanasia. That's the topic nobody likes to address, but with pigs, as all other livestock, there are times when you have to make a decision and you have to, end suffering for that animal. So can they euthanize, and how do they euthanize? So, put a plan together. You may not be out there very often if they only have 5 or 6 pigs, but if they're bigger, they may enjoy having you out quarterly or every 6 months, just having a look through, see how things are going. And again, you're building that relationship with them, and it's fun. It really is. For me, a walk off the beaten path of commercial herds, and I do quite enjoy smallholders. So that is the approach. And now we're going to go through sort of a number of slides discussing, when we're looking at these animals, how do I know what's going on? How do I know what's normal and what's not normal? So you need to know the pig. And just like people, for the most part, they're pretty social animals. And I'm more than pleased to tell you that they are matriarchal group. So girls rule. The boys are solitary. Sorry about your luck. They get the job done and then they get to leave. So the girls live together. They naturally will root and forage for a variety of feedstuffs in the wild. And actually, they will eat carrion. For me, I often, when I go into barns, you can tell what a pig's mood's like by its tail. It's much like a dog. Is it up and curly and wagging? A pig that's not well, or perhaps very fearful, it will carry its tail straight down or tucked between its legs. So it's a bit of a clue. This is a really big chart, so we're not going to go through every part of it, but these, you want to review this and have a look. The lying down activity, and where that's really important is for environmental temperature. If pigs are cold, they pile. And if they're hot, they're panting, they're trying to lie apart and radiate off as much heat as possible from them. So that's always your first clue, especially in farrowing areas or weaner areas. To your right there, that photograph, I love pictures like this. They've got an area, a microenvironment where pigs can choose to stay warm, or they can come out to go to the bathroom or to eat. These are nice, healthy little pigs. They're looking really good. Pigs often greet, they'll bark if you come into a barn, or they'll just grunt softly. They're curious, they run to the back of a pen, or they'll come forward, and it depends. And smallholders are so human associated that, anybody can walk in and they'll come and visit with them. So, and again, like I said, they have a conversation. You look at sort of, where are they going to the bathroom? What does the feces look at? Like I said, if, my earlier slide there, if I have a situation with, really runny diarrhea with a lot of mucus in it, well, I probably got something going on that's not normal. They'll exercise. Young pigs will play. It's a lot of fun to watch them snorting and barking at each other and carrying on. And heavier pigs get lazier, which is why people are often disappointed with potbelly pigs, because as they get older, they just want to sleep about 20 hours a day, which is about as much as a cat does. So I don't think people realize that. But they are playful animals, and they're also very curious and will explore the environment, and they are uber destructive. Let's note that, yes. So eating behavior, obviously, that's a big clue. If pigs aren't eating, you either have a problem with the feed or you've got something going on with the pigs. So that's an early warning system there. And water, they drink about 10% of their body weight per day, depending on, more if it's hot, less if it's cold. They should have access to water. Although in the codes of practice, I had to interpret this for something, and so access to water, they don't have to have 24/7. If you think about some of these barns in a cold Ontario winter, somebody may bring fresh water to them 3 times a day, but the pig doesn't drink every hour. They're much like us. They'll decide, oh, I'm thirsty, I'll go get something. So long as they've got a regular supply of water, I think that's what's important. Pigs also need shelter. They're subtropical animals. They really aren't built for, other than wild boar, but they're really not built for being outside without some kind of shelter. And protection from predators and also protection from escaping. So good fencing is important. Bedding for the shelters if they're being housed outdoors in some kind of building other than a barn, like a hoop building or something. So it should be able to try and clean those pennings or houses somewhat regularly. We recommend, yearly in our pork excellence programs for commercial barns. I don't think it's a bad idea for smallholders, but again, it depends on the barn. Some of these accommodations are not always amenable to good cleaning. And we'll talk about this, but the pig has different requirements for different temperatures depending on what size it is. And remember that when you're standing there looking at the pigs, you're feeling, if you're in a barn, especially, I notice this, if I see pigs piling on the floor, where I'm standing at, it's warm because warm air rises, but where the pig's at, cold air falls. And so they may be piling up because they're not very happy and they're cold. So controlling air quality and air temperature is important, certainly gases. Some smallholders may have a ventilated barn and many just have windows, and that's fine. So the pig behavior, pigs will talk to you. You get to know pigs and get to know pig behavior, and they'll tell you what's wrong. You've got to be able to speak pig. And I think I'm fairly bilingual now between human and pig. So although I guess I get surprised once in a while. So optimum temperatures are important. So here we go is a chart, and newborn piglets need a fairly warm temperature. That's why we supply heat lamps for them and some kind of warmth on the floor, whether it's bedding or heated pad or something. And as they get bigger, their temperature requirements start to drop. And you can see here that growing pigs have a wide range of temperatures that they're comfortable at. Finishing pigs like a cooler. I wouldn't say that gestating sows like 10 degrees. I would probably say it's a little warmer than that, but for the most purposes of this talk, that gives you the ranges anyhow. Certainly if pigs are in social groups, you can run them at lower temperatures than if they're in stalls, and I don't think there's many smallholders that are running stalls. Here in Canada, there's all kinds of great ways to house pigs for the elements. So pigs, not only for the winter time, but also for the summer, they require shade from the sun, and they don't want to be too cold. They don't want the wind to blow at them. And so you've got a suitable outdoor conditions that protect them from adverse weather. And also, maybe some kind of protection from predators. You can see the fencing here is pretty decent, and some kind of parasite control. We'll get into that at some point. So there's a couple examples of rudimentary housing, but it works quite well. Obviously, on the right-hand side, there's going to have to be some closure for the winter time so that the wind doesn't blow right in through there, but that's really nice for the summer. And the left-hand side is pretty cool. It's just like a little doggy box and the pigs can go in. If people are building them, you certainly want to build them tall enough that the pig, can't get at the roofing or the beams across the top, that there's enough height for them. So the other thing, we see pigs on pasture. There's kuni on pasture here. Although they're described as a pig that survives well on pasture, it's really not a balanced diet. So make sure that their nutritional requirements are met. we talk about rotating pigs between pastures. That's if you have pastures to rotate them through. So that may not be. And if you don't rotate a pasture, you're going to wind up with a moonscape because they'll dig everything up. Pasture rotation is nice because you can reduce parasites and get regrowth of the pasture itself. Pigs often will make a mud hole in pasture and wallow them to stay cool in the summertime so that they can use evaporative cooling to stay cooler. So sort of keep that in mind as well. If they're out on pasture, they should have shade, obviously shelter, and somewhere to cool off on the hottest of days. So white pigs, certainly commercial pigs, are prone to sunburn. Oh yeah. And so they need shade. And they should be able to find comfortable shelter and one that holds all of them at the same time. They shouldn't have to line up to take turns. Locating the facility, taking advantage of windbreaks or conducting windbreaks to control snow. That's kind of important. How are you going to deal with emergencies? These kind of things, that go through with the smallholders to think about. Cover the feed if it's outside. Put hoppers on the feeders if they're feeding with the commercial sort of pig feeders, and obviously opportunities for wallowing. So fencing dues, and this is all in the notes and also in the smallholder manual. Like double fencing is really good. I was at a great place last week. I'll show you photos of how he's got double fencing. Special hog fencing is really good because it's pretty sturdy stuff. Pigs can lift it up, they can dig underneath, and they can breach the fence. So having an electric fence on the outside certainly precludes their escape if it's good and it's functional. And check that for weak spots. Pigs will surprise you. So there's some examples of fencing there taken from the smallholder manual. So double fencing, and hog fencing buried in the ground. Like I said, they're pretty fond of digging underneath things and taking off. Fencing don'ts, don't only have electric fences, because if something happens and the fence shorts out, well, it's game over. They're out having a play day outside somewhere. Again, there's some examples of poorer fencing, page wire that's starting to collapse. Pigs get really good at destroying page wire too. I'm impressed. So you want to have a really good sturdy fence for them. Wild boar, and again, this is out of the manual. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Look at the electric fence, minimum 4,000 volts. You really make sure they stay inside. And so I'm not going to beat this to death, but you want to be absolutely sure that it's strong. So I've been chatting away here for some time, and how about we take a short break? I don't know, Doris, what do we say? 3-4 minutes?
Yep, that sounds great. So if everyone wants to
bio break.
Yeah, let's do that, and we'll meet again at 5:52 Eastern time. If that works for everyone. Great. All right, Sue.
Okay. Hopefully everybody's a little bit refreshed, and we'll go onwards with the second half of the show. So housing, yeah, it's really, I think it's like really high on my list of important things to look at with smallholders. It's how you manage them, how you house them, is how well they're going to perform. And it depending on the size of the operation, do they have, young gilts, so the young early sows groups, how are they managing the feeding? If there's, if they've got 15, 20 of these animals and there's some older girls there, that often is the case, and they have some young gilts in there, maybe they want to split them and group them by size, because some of these big sows can be bullies. And how do you manage some of these sows who, maybe lost some body condition? Is there a separate area, separate penning where you can keep them to kind of fatten them up? And one thing to remember, I see this with a lot of my producers. They're really good about this. If so, they've got some thin sows, and they're in a group housing situation. So we'll put them together in a pen so they can eat together, and they're companionable. A pig by itself actually doesn't want to eat that much because it's missing its herd mate. So you want to think about that. Even if there's only one skinny sow and you're going to put her in a pen to fatten her up, well, put someone else in there, or maybe a younger pig in there with her for companionship, because it'll help. And, like I said, the sows that are being bullied. Pigs are like people, they're dreadful bullies. And if is some bullying going on, that you can sort of keep the bullies together and the bullied apart, and that would be wonderful. So make sure, certainly with smallholders, that their sows have adequate bedding, and and you want to obviously not have really deep bedding in the summer, because the pigs can't sweat. So they've got to be able to stay cool. And if they're indoor, outdoor, they can choose what they're going to do. But if they're in a barn, yeah, we don't need thick piles of straw for them. So the cool thing about pigs is in these barns, that they will burrow in deep straw to stay warm. And so remember, it's deep straw. They need lots of bedding. So I put this in here, but I really don't see sows in stalls in smallholder operations. They, on commercial farms, there can be some negative behaviors that can appear. Actually, good management, I don't see a lot of sham chewing and bar biting. If they have some radios playing, or good interaction with humans, or whatever's going on. So most smallholders, they've got them in groups anyway. And so it's less of an issue with some of these negative behaviors. So clearly, flooring is also important. It impacts mental health and comfort. Mats can improve the welfare of sow and piglets if they're using farrowing crates. These rubber dairy mats are really handy, and then you can just layer them with straw, and they're easy to clean off afterwards. Deep bedding is fine as well for the pigs, or deep shavings is perfectly acceptable. I think, shavings certainly are more absorbent, and it's easier to clean them up. But with straw, it's you're able to make that deep bedding environment where they can burrow. It's a little harder to burrow in shavings for sows. So, maybe that's sort of my more preference is straw than the shavings. So for those that are using farrowing crates, they're used just to prevent crushing of piglets right after farrowing. So the sow, these crates should be long enough that the sow can lie down, and she doesn't have her head in the feeder as a pillow. She shouldn't, the crate shouldn't be so narrow that, she touches both sides at the same time. And, she's not rubbing her back along the top, otherwise there's going to have to some adjustments are going to be made. And the codes often, our codes note that you can't keep these sows in the farrowing crates for longer than 6 weeks, unless the sow is an uber mom and they've decided to bring some piglets over to her from another sow that's not milking so well. There's a nice example of a mat. This is actually in a little research barn, and there's all of 10 sows in there. And they put these mats in last year for extra comfort for the sows. The only problem, they said they didn't like them, is because towards the back end of the sow, some fecal material, et cetera, was accumulating, and it could get slippery even with those grooves cut for the sow. So the plan was to cut this mat probably about halfway back and slope it so that the sow was pretty comfortable in the front end, but she was able to get rid of her feces and urine through the grates at the back. Here's another example. This was a recent visit to a really cool smallholder. I didn't expect this, and this guy has repurposed crates, shipping crates, and he's got 12 farrowing rooms. He has heritage breeds in here, and you can see that there's the separation just with really nice gating. It's very precise, and then there's external fencing. So you've got the internal pens coming out and the external gating, and he does supply bedding, through the cooler months of the year. You can see he's got self feeders there. I just thought this was a brilliant little operation. You can see these pigs. For water on the left, he took a barrel, it's a gravity flow, and he put a water nipple in it so they can access water. And on the right, you can see, I think that's a large black cross. That's gonna be a cross because you got straight pigs. And these straight pigs are not wild boar. These are what Mangalitos look like when they're babies. They have little racing stripes on them as well. So we'll get to heritage. Actually, I can tell the story now. We'll get also to when we talk about feeding. So the question here was, were these pigs being adequately fed? You can see there's corn down here and whatnot. And you want to look at the requirements for heritage breeds. I'll get to this a little bit later. I think it comes up again, because they don't read the standards of the commercial pig. These are hardy pigs that live on nuts and acorns and root vegetables and just like nothing. So their requirements are much, much different. So know what you're working with, especially when you get into heritage breeds. I actually had to go home and do homework on this, and it was tons of fun looking this up. There's a nice example of a farrowing pen. This guy actually was a welfare friendly operation, but I thought I put them in there so you can see he's got shavings. The sows will nest and have natural behaviors prior to farrowing out. The one caution I will tell you about animals in farrowing pens is they're really protective of their young, and you want to have a pig board with you if you're going to try and step in there, and you want to have someone handy on the outside, because these sows will go after you. They can be pretty aggressive at times, and these are really friendly sows. So for piglets, having a warming zone, having an area where they've got a heat lamp. I love the hovers, the covers on the left side there. Hot air rises. Why wouldn't you hold it underneath something? I never understand. For example, on the right, where I've got a heat lamp, but hot air rises. So I think you could keep a lot more heat on the piglets if you had like a little cover there. The only problem with the cover there is if it's close enough to the sow, she'll chew it up. So you want to be careful with that. Here is a great idea from a fabulous fellow from a Hutterick colony out in Manitoba. I went to a pig conference, and this guy, what they do out there, they take plastic and they just run it across, and it holds the warm air in over the piglets. They have heated floors there. That black mat will probably be heated. And I'm like, oh my gosh, of all things, isn't this just a brilliant idea? So I'm tossing it out to you guys. You'll be a hero. If somebody's having problems keeping pigs warm, there you go. Obviously, there's a nice litter of pigs, very comfortable. It's also summertime. So once we get them out of the farrowing room, we get them to the weaner and grower finish housing. A warm, draft-free environment is really important for weaned pigs. Much easier to grow a pig up that's 4 to 5 to 6 weeks old than 3 weeks. So there's no need to wean them at 3 weeks if you get a smallholder. I mean, why? There isn't this crush of pigs farrowing behind them. If they want to wean at 5 weeks or 4 weeks, I think that's fabulous. 5 weeks, that might be my preference. So you can make those little shelters like I showed you in the previous photo. They've got a microenvironment they can go to. They got a lid over top. You can put deep bedding in there, and then they can go to the bathroom. So you've got, you should have enough feeder space. Remember, when they're weaned, they all like to eat together. So make sure they can. There's a cool little operation there. They got pigs weaned, and they've got lots of straw, and these guys look pretty darn happy as far as I'm concerned. There's a hoop structure, again, from this welfare friendly operation, but you don't, and this is pretty elegant, but I don't think there's a huge investment into something like this as compared to building a concrete barn. But many people repurpose older buildings. Some people will have, I mean, most smallholders will have boars. They're not going to be using artificial insemination. So A, respect the boar, and B, they're usually on their own, although many people run them together because they never know when their sows are coming into heat. So there you go. But if they are housing their boars individually, they should be able to stand up, lie down, turn around, and obviously have some kind of bedding as well in the cooler weather. And with the codes of practice, it is required that you have a sick pen. There's going to be pigs. That poor guy in the top right, he's not feeling too good. So there should be a hospital pen of some kind. You know, it's really nice. Like I said, if they get these dairy mats, they can put them down and then put bedding on top, and they can be somewhat more comfortable. And because they're going to lose body heat, they're not feeling well, and they're just radiating it off to the environment. So keep them comfy. You know, even having a little hover so they can go underneath, and obviously also, you know, sufficient lighting is important so you can evaluate these pigs and how they're doing. And what's sufficient lighting? Can you read a newspaper? Life is simple. Enrichment, I would say most smallholders have pretty good enrichment for their pigs. They've got straw to chew on, or these pigs are out in pasture, or they got some environment, you know, so they're pretty happy. You know, in our swine excellence program for commercial producers, we require 2 forms of enrichment. You know, a radio will do human contact. Obviously, people are seeing these pigs, you know, human interaction, but you know, these pigs normally have lots going on. I would discourage that these pigs interact with, you know, poultry and ducks, geese, ostriches, things like that, because obviously our avian species have a different influenza virus, but the pig is quite nicely able to be exposed to that avian virus and mix it up and produce another form. And, you know, people are also obviously working with both these species, so you can then spread them onto the human, or the human can give their version of the flu. And this is how some of these really novel influenza viruses come about, is from the mixing. So if we're able to keep the pigs from the poultry, it's probably a really nice idea. It can be difficult, I think, with some of these little farms with a multitude of species, but let's try. So back to feed. I think a lot of smallholders just buy complete feed from the mill. It's much easier that way, and not many are making their own, unless they, you know, perhaps have a mill and they've got beef cattle or something, and they can mill out their own feed. But I think most are on a complete feed. And as I said, you know, here we're talking about, you know, feeding a couple times a day for breeding gestation animals. You know, we use full feed, a free choice feed for weaners and grow finish pigs, daily access. They should have access to adequate water. And nursing piglets, there's a feed called a creep feed. So it's a really highly digestible feed that's got a lot of milk in it. And if we can start them off at, you know, 10 days or 2 weeks to get used to it, that's fine. I don't, you know, some people will, some people won't. If you're weaning around 6 weeks, I don't think creep feed is hugely essential. And then the feed company will certainly be more than able to help the producer along. So they're another, you know, the feed rep is another guy that you can use as a source for pig feeding information. You know, I'm not a nutritionist, but they can help out a lot. So we have some, you know, here's some guidelines for feeding sows, you know, and lactating sows, body condition scoring, you know, and one thing to note here, certainly if sows wean off, if you had a sow that had, say, 18 pigs and she weaned off at 4 weeks, she's probably gonna be pretty darn thin. She'll be a condition score of 2. And the ideal time to get them back in shape is the first 30 days after breeding. You try and fatten them up, you know, so you say, oh my gosh, my sow is so skinny and she's in her 3rd trimester, and all you're going to do is have, you know, 5 kilo piglets, because all the food is going to the piglets at that point, not to the sow. So note to self, if you want to get them in shape, do it early. Boars, again, feeding them. And there's some more information there on growing pigs. Now, I referenced these heritage breeds, and I did find one article on feeding Mangalitsa. So this smallholder that I was telling you about, isn't this a colorful photo? This is what I walked into. They wanted to find an outlet for their greenhouse peppers. And these are apparently, I learned that these orange and red peppers, the grocery stores really didn't want them at this point, and some of them are B grade, I guess, whatever you call it. Which I just, I wanted to just take bags of these things and take them back in my truck and do something with them. But so they feed them. He decided to feed them to pigs. So it started with the greenhouses, and then he got pigs. And so he started with commercial pigs, and they didn't do very well, obviously through the first winter. So these guys are on peppers, and you saw that they were also being fed corn. And so the question was raised, is this a balanced diet for these pigs? Well, they're not commercial pigs, they're heritage. So we have Hereford pigs. You see the pig in the middle with the red on it. It's a Hereford pig cross. He's got large black, he's got Mangalitsa, he's got red wattle, and what's the other one? Tamworth in there. And so these pigs are slow growing pigs who have been designed to live on nothing. So I had a colleague spend a little time and do some homework for me because I was really busy, and I said, hey, you got time to do this? And she said, yeah, I'd be happy to. And so the Mangalitsa really only needs about a 13% diet, where a commercial finishing pig needs 16%. So you see that 3% protein is a big difference. So I just suggested that they supplement these pigs for the extra protein between the corn, which runs around 9%, just use some hog finisher, feed their nursing sows and gestating sows the same, but they can get by quite nicely with the peppers and the corn as well. Do note that it's no table scraps should be fed to pigs. You see this happen where, the pig is kind of the kitchen catcher, and really shouldn't, especially in light of foreign animal diseases and things that could be present on improperly cooked meat products that might get to the pig. So don't feed recycled products. The peppers are different because they're direct from basically the garden to the pig. That's okay, but we're talking something that went from like restaurant scraps, so it's kind of cycled through a restaurant and back out the door. We can't be doing that. Water's huge. Water's huge. Water's huge. Pigs have actually very dilute urine, and so they pee a lot and they drink a lot. And if there's an accident where, in my experience in larger farms, they'll be working in the water lines and forget to turn them back on. And if it's for long enough, as in 4 days or 5 days, you can get what they call salt toxicity, which is irreversible neurologic damage done to the pigs from severe dehydration and then overhydration once you turn them on. And I've just put a reference in there if anybody's really interested in reading about this. So, pigs can drink a lot, especially in hot weather, but not so much in cold weather. And so we should be able to provide them with enough. And then the water line shouldn't freeze in winter. Pigs are dreadful, though. I mean, you got to get some kind of really secure trough. They tend to want to root around troughs and dump them upside down, and can be really frustrating. So I think this is why, certainly in the winter, people water them at regular periods, just because pigs can really tear stuff out if it's not nailed down in place. Quickly going through, what the pig can see as far as if you're working with them, they pretty much have about 270 degrees or more ability to see around them. Their eyes are located in the side of their head, and directly behind them there's a blind spot. So if you're trying to move a pig, you don't stand behind it, you stand off to the side so it can see you, and you can pivot the pig one way or the other. And you remember that you want to, as a veterinarian working with them or working with the smallholder, you want to safely handle the pigs. You want to startle them. If you get them really excited, then they're going to be impossible to work with, and you might as well walk away and have a coffee and come back later and try again. They have a really strong escape reaction. They don't like to back up. They startle easily. So just basically be calm. Take your time. It'll take you just as long to move the pig from A to B, taking your time, as it is screaming and yelling and waving your arms. Moving them with other pigs is sometimes good. Using hog panels or pig boards are really useful. Be careful with boars. They're very unpredictable. So Most smallholder boars are fairly tame, but it's still a boar and you want to be careful with them. And certainly if a pig turns around and wants to go the other way because it decides it's not going the way you want it to go, just get out of the way. 600-pound sow hurtling down the alleyway at you is like gonna hurt if you get hit. So just agree with her that she can go that way and you can go back and move her again. So a hog rattle is just something it's a flat paddle with some marbly type things inside that make a nice shaky noise. That usually moves pigs really nicely. Hog board, it impairs their vision, so you can direct them where you want to go. A flag I don't really use, or the matador cape, that's just there. This is if you want to watch a terrific video on moving pigs, I love this video. It's from Manitoba Pork, and it is just got some great tips in there. So I'm not playing it here. We don't have enough time, but if you got some time, sit down, make some popcorn and watch how to move pigs. It's pretty cool. Pig restraint, under 20 kilos, you can certainly pick them up. If you pick them up by the hind legs and put your hands under their chest to carry them, support the pig's weight. Over 20 kilos, unless you're Superman, they're really hard to lift. So, you can try and restrain them in a corner, or use pig snares to restrain pigs for a short period of time. If you're blood testing or doing some other procedures, perhaps euthanasia would be another one, but then the pig isn't going to come back from that. But that's another talk. So don't use a hog snare on their legs or anywhere else. Just use it on the front of the pig. A little bit of practice, you'll be pretty good with that. I've used rope snares in a snap when I've needed them. So just be mindful of the tools that will help you when you're trying to move pigs or work with pigs. So just going quickly, again, 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days. Pigs are in heat for about 3 weeks, or every 3 weeks they come into heat. Look at that magic 3 number again. They're in heat for about 36 to 96 hours. You should have an average of 1 boar to 20 females. For pigs, I don't really get into specifics what vaccines to use. These are generally preferring for sows, leptoerysipelas parvo, probably a really good idea, especially pigs that are on pasture. Influenza, well, I think our last influenza here in Canada disappeared. We're using sort of a regional influenza. For those that are interested, speak to a swine vet. Be glad to talk to you. E. coli, obviously, for pre-weaning diarrheas. Maybe circovirus, maybe PRRS. It depends on the size of the herd and what health issues there are. And obviously we would, if gilts are coming in, we would give them a pre-breeding vaccine, and we should boost that as well. Give the vaccines on the neck, never give it in the butt of the pig. And make sure you've got a nice sturdy 18 gauge, 1.5-inch needle. Again, piglet vaccination, it depends. Maybe commercial pigs, you'll use these. I don't even, quite frankly, with heritage pigs, they're probably hardy enough. They don't require these vaccines, but I don't know. There's not enough of them around for me to tell you exactly. So you may wish to discuss this with the producer. Iron is not required. Iron injections for piglets, and they're born naturally anemic. But if sows have access to soil, they go outside, you don't have to worry about iron injections for them. And other procedures, you may get called for castrating piglets if the smallholder isn't comfortable. They must be given an analgesic afterwards. And if they're older than 10 days, then you have to use sedation and analgesia to do the castration. I have a client, I love them to pieces. They have 2 huge sows and a big old boar, and they have about a litter a year. And they're an older couple, and they're perfect, hilarious. And I just really love visiting with them. And the first time I went out 3 years ago, I had to castrate pigs that were about 45 kilos, and it was a giant rodeo. So yeah, we did manage to get them cornered and sedate them, and then castrate them, and I gave them analgesia afterwards. And I said to them, this gets a whole lot cheaper if you can do them like, 3 or 4 weeks of age, if that's what you want. And because they weren't comfortable doing them as young piglets. And so the second time I went out, they were probably 20 kilos, and it wasn't quite so bad. And the third time, they were about 10 kilos. And I said, now we're talking turkey. And, I told them, like I said, it gets cheaper if they get smaller. And so it did. And they said, oh my gosh, you're kidding. And I said, no, because it's just that much easier for everybody. I mean, castrating, chasing and castrating a 100-pound pig is not my idea of a good time. Maybe younger vets would enjoy that. And if you want to, I'll send you off to a few people. At any rate, so finally, timing is good here. So familiarize yourself with normal pig husbandry and procedures. The more you go around and visit with these people, the more you'll get used to sort of smallholders or small commercial operations. Get a little reference library going. I've got all kinds. I'm a dreadful filer. I can never find anything in my computer, but I have all kinds of neat things I stash in my computer. And right now I'm stashing nutritional requirements of heritage breeds, which there's not a lot out on, but if anybody wants how to feed a Mangalitsa, let me know. And don't forget that there's lots of resources, swine practitioners, commodity groups. CAS has got things on its website. We have the Canadian Association of Swine Vets. There's lots out there, and we're more than happy to help out. And just if you're wondering what on earth I'm doing there, this is what pigs did for me. I wound up in South Africa in a country called Lesotho, and I did some gig work with an NGO who were working with HIV/AIDS folks, and so there's sort of the human part, but they asked me to come along because they're working with the foster homes of children who have lost parents to this dreadful disease, and they wanted to improve their pig rearing capabilities, and basically it was turning one pig into two. And so here you have a classic smallholder, and I don't think it would be out of place in Ontario. And it was really fun and actually somewhat successful. I think it's been more successful with regular visits, but it's a long way to go to South Africa. But we have kept in touch, and so you never know where you're going to be when you start doing pigs. So with that, I think our timing is pretty good, and let me see if we have any questions. What am I using for analgesia? I use meloxicam. I'm going to go backwards in questions here because this one's just right there. So you can get oral meloxicam for piglets, but you can use, basically, you can use any analgesic that, you have to remember it's got to have usage for swine on the label. So if they're pet pigs, that's different because we're not going to be sending them to any kind of harvest. They're going to stay. Oral meloxicam, yeah, it's licensed for swine. It's maybe not, we get it done up, we get them made up at pharmacies for us, because we also sometimes add toltrazuril for coccidiosis. So yes, it is licensed for swine with a withdrawal time of 5 days. Okay, oral iron supplementation. I haven't, they used to use sweet peat, which was an oral iron supplementation. Injectable iron, it's probably is overdosing. If he's giving too much, and it depends on the size of the piglet and when he's doing it. I mean, iron should be given at 2 to 3 days of age, and just check, because iron now, it's 200 milligrams per mil. So it's actually doubled in concentration in a lot of iron products. So you want to go and check that first if he's having fatal reactions. I haven't run into this in a long time, but my guess would be that they may just be overdosing the piglet, or just giving it way too early in time as well. So check that. Okay, castration, trimming, test, and older pet pigs. Okay, that's in the, we're going to cover that in the Potbelly Pig session, the last session. So I'm going to dodge you on that right now, because the protocols are there. And if you miss the session by chance, you'll be able to pick it up. It's going to be recorded, and you'll be able to get that. It'll be in the notes. Sorry, it's in the notes too, as well. Okay, and Doris has sent the Manitoba pork link to everybody. So good questions. Thank you. Yeah, pasture parasites for sure. Roundworms are a big one, and they're very common in swine, whether they're commercial or smallholder. The eggs are very environmentally resistant and can live up to 15 years in concrete, which is why they are still a problem even in commercial swine raised indoors. So you can certainly, do fecal assessment to see what the parasite load is. I think, with smallholders, that's great to do regularly. And B, a deworming program for them. So you can certainly, there's a water soluble product called piperazine, which is old as dirt, but you can add it to the water, which makes it really easy for the producer, especially with smallholders. It's maybe a little bit easier, but there's other products that are being administered in feed. So it depends on the size of the herd. But again, yeah, if they're on the same pasture constantly, then, or in the barn that's not being cleaned as frequently as it could be, although cleaning doesn't get rid of the roundworm eggs either, but I would certainly monitor parasites because it can cause liver condemnations in swine.
That's great. Thanks, Sue. Anyone else with questions, feel free to chat. Oh, there's one more question. Can commercial pigs be held in outside pens for a couple hours waiting for slaughter?
This would be smallholder commercial pigs, or on a I would assume.
Sorry, I just got that comment from someone who messaged me directly. Do you want to unmute yourself, or do you want to chat that into the chat box? Otherwise, while we're waiting for that, there's another question from Lexi. What can be done for trichinella monitoring for pasture pigs?
Oh, smallholder commercial. Okay, let me do the smallholder commercial. First of all, so holding them outside the abattoir before slaughter, it depends on the environmental conditions. But or are they waiting on farm to go to slaughter? I don't really see an issue with that. But again, it depends on the environment. If it's a really hot, stinky day, or a really cold day, it's probably less than optimal to have them held outside before they're going to be harvested. Trichinella, it's shouldn't be a problem in pasture pigs unless they're accessing things that they shouldn't be, like I said, they will eat carrion. So if there's other animals on pasture that possibly could be infected with trichinella, then the pigs could get exposed to that as well. Now, if they're obviously also, that's why we don't encourage feeding meat waste or any undercooked meat, because that's another potential way of being exposed. It's a very low risk hazard now, like compared to years ago, but it really, that's why we're really mindful of keeping pigs with pigs and not feeding them things that they shouldn't be having.
A question from Adriana. Have you found that there's a higher risk of anaphylactic reactions to vaccines in pigs and other animals?
I wouldn't say no. I would say not. I think our vaccines are pretty safe. There's the circovirus vaccines. There's a company, a couple of companies that make vaccines that have been noted to give cold shock reaction in pigs, and it's really something to see. If we don't bring these particular vaccines up to room temperature prior to administering, you get the odd pig that just falls over and it looks like it's completely dead. Will recover, will come back to life, but it seems to be rather than anaphylactic, it's a reaction to one of the adjuvants in a cold state in the animal, and so the animal reacts to that. But I wouldn't say no. With the swine vaccines we use, I haven't seen any higher rate of anaphylaxis in them. But that's a good question.
Another question.
Tail bites. Oh goodness. So in my very opinionated opinion, tail biting is a vice that's often brought on by something gone wrong in the environment. They're either crowded, they're cold, they're too hot, the feed, there's something wrong with the feed. You're feeding a feed that's too low in protein. You're feeding a feed that may have mycotoxins. You harvested your own grain and there's mycotoxins in there, and they're just like, oh, this tastes terrible. I think I'll eat somebody's tail instead. So tail docking was done to help prevent tail biting. But in my opinion, I think we've done it backwards. I think we should get things right before we decide we're taking, shortening the tails on pigs. So just making sure your feed and housing and density is right. Get your management right. And tail biting, you may see it the odd time. This summer, actually, a couple of commercial herds, we had, I call it bottom of the silo syndrome. So the corn was kind of funky and the pigs detested it. And so they went in a tail biting spree. And once they get started, that's difficult to work with, but we try. But get things right, and you really shouldn't have a bad time with tail biting. I think if I were to guess, I would say it's probably less of an issue in smallholders, precisely because they've got room, they've got pasture, they've got a lot of enrichment, a lot of things actually going right. So it tends to be, in my opinion, less of a problem. Gilt pre-breeding vaccine that covers the core. So there's a variety of leptoerysipelas parvo vaccines, combination vaccines out there. One of them would be Farasure B by Zoetis, gets everything. So that seems to be my fallback. We used to have a wide variety of swine vaccines years ago. Our selection has been limited as pharmaceutical companies have expanded in size and shrunk in numbers. So that's basically, there's also an erysipelas parvo only, but I think if you're going to have pigs outside, you want a lepto component. They're going to be exposed to standing water at times, and there may be, mouse or rat urine in there, and they carry leptospirosis. So I think it's just a really smart idea to include that lepto part. Yeah, bears too.
Okay, finally, there's a meeting I'm supposed to be in.
All right, so anyone else with any questions, feel free to unmute yourself now or just chat it into the chat box. We have 1 more minute for questions. All right, hearing none, I guess we'll just end our session. Thanks so much, Sue. I heard this talk last year, but I always find that I learned something new with your lecture. So thanks so much for this. And we'll see everyone again next week, next Tuesday, same time, same place, same Zoom link. And Sue, do you want to quickly go over what you'll be going over next week?
So now that everybody is up to speed on what a normal pig is, and you're all so well educated, we're going to look at the sick pig and evaluation of same next week. And that's as large of a basket of information, if not larger. So we're really going to keep you busy processing information.
All right, sounds good. See you next week, everyone. Bye.
Okay. See you guys.
Have a good
Thanks.
night.